Hello and welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to be exploring the mind and message of Min-Seob, the author of Genome Compass. This should be quite the journey for anyone who wants those deep insights without getting bogged down in all the complex details. We've looked through excerpts from his book, the preface, summary, table of contents, some selected chapters, really trying to pull out the core of what he wants to tell readers. So what's our mission today? It's really about uncovering the central arguments and key insights that Min-Seob is passionate about sharing.
It's definitely going to be interesting. Right from the preface, you get a glimpse into the author himself, which I think provides a great starting point for understanding his perspective.
Right. Min-Seob is described as a genome scientist, researcher, entrepreneur, and educator. That's, well, quite an impressive background.
It really is.
His bio mentions this early fascination with biology that led him to study in the U.S. And what struck me was the influence of his parents. He specifically mentions his mother emphasizing the value of science on his birthday, which happens to be Science Day in Korea, April 21st.
Oh, interesting detail.
Yeah, you have to think that Bohr played a big role in shaping his early path, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. That kind of early exposure and encouragement must have been pivotal. And it's also interesting to note his evolution, from dedicated researcher to entrepreneur, and now grappling with this age of AI, which he calls Homo Intelligence. His perspective has clearly shifted over time.
Exactly. And he gives this really personal insight into his initial motivation. In the preface, he writes something like, "My decision to major in biology wasn't based on any grand reason.
Okay.
I was simply in awe of the existence of life, and I wanted to understand the principles hidden within it." It seems like that fundamental curiosity is what's driven him.
That sense of wonder, yeah. It's often the mark of great scientific minds. And it's touching how he dedicates the book's journey to his parents, calling them his lamp and compass. It really highlights the profound guidance they must have provided throughout his life and career.
Okay, so let's transition a bit and really get into the core argument of the book. What's the central thesis Min-Seob is putting forward here?
Well, the core argument in Genome Compass presents a fascinating shift in how we might understand ourselves. Min-Seob suggests moving away from the traditional view. Humans defined solely by fixed genes. Instead, he proposes we should be understood as Homo Intelligence.
Homo Intelligence.
Yeah, meaning information-based beings who are constantly evolving through this complex interplay between our genomic information, our environment, sociocultural context, and crucially, advanced tech like AI.
So the genome isn't this static blueprint we've maybe always thought it was.
Exactly. The book really emphasizes that the genome should be seen as a dynamic operating system.
Operating system.
Yeah, it's not just passively storing information, it's actively sensing environmental cues and responding to information. And this leads directly to that core metaphor, the genome compass.
The genome compass. Intriguing. How does he frame that concept?
He presents it as a guide for navigating the uncertain future. The idea is that by understanding and heeding the flow, the information within our genes, we can chart a better course. As he puts it in the preface, the genome is not just a record of our human genetic sequence. The genome is a tool for designing the direction of life, a language that reads the environment and information and responds to my experiences.
And this is where it gets really interesting, that intersection of genetics and AI.
Right. A key aim of the book is to explore how AI and Homo intelligence can coexist and interact to shape a new understanding of what it means to be human, and all of this from the viewpoint of a geneticist.
Now, Genome Compass touches on some really fascinating themes. Where should we even start with some of the key highlights?
Well, one fundamental theme is the understanding of evolution itself. Min-Seob stresses that human evolution wasn't the linear process we often imagine. He highlights the scientific evidence showing we're actually biological mosaics, carrying genetic legacies from other hominins like Neanderthals and Denisovans.
So, not a neat progression from one species to the next.
Not at all. The book emphasizes that diversity, hybridization, even interspecies interaction weren't exceptions, but maybe fundamental mechanisms driving survival and adaptation. It paints a much more interconnected picture of our past.
That makes sense. And what about the genome itself? You mentioned he calls it dynamic.
Yes, that's another key theme. The book explains that DNA isn't a static library. It actively senses environmental stimuli, and the expression of our genes is modulated by epigenetics.
Epigenetics.
Which you can think of as mechanisms controlling when genes are switched on or off without altering the DNA sequence itself.
Okay, like the same musical score, but different instruments playing it at different times.
That's a great analogy. He also talks about the importance of what was once dismissed as junk DNA, which we now know plays crucial roles in complex gene regulation, sometimes even passing adaptive traits to the next generation. He also brings up fascinating examples like mitochondria, which started as symbiotic bacteria within our cells, and the microbiome, that vast ecosystem of microbes in and on us, influencing everything from digestion to brain health. It paints the human body less as a single entity and more as a collective.
And it sounds like he even reevaluates things in our biology that might be seen as errors.
That's a really interesting point. The book explores how elements often seen as genetic flaws, mutations, transposons, or jumping genes, even endogenous retroviruses, ERVs, which are remnants of ancient viral infections embedded in our genome, can actually be engines of evolutionary creativity.
Viruses as sources of innovation. That's a surprising thought.
It is. He uses the example of syncytin, a protein essential for placental development in mammals, which actually originated from viral genes integrated into our genome. It makes you rethink how we define beneficial or detrimental in the evolutionary story. Even the Y chromosome, often viewed as diminishing, is highlighted for its crucial role, providing insights into male lineage and evolutionary constraints.
And he applies this dynamic, interactive view to modern challenges too, right?
Definitely. The book reinterprets conditions like ADHD, obesity, infertility, even diseases like cancer, through a systems lens of multi-layered interactions between genes and environment. He discusses how factors like endocrine disruptors, chronic stress, and dietary shifts can interact with our genetic predispositions. There's also emerging research suggesting environmental traumas and psychosocial stress might have epigenetic impacts that could even be passed down, which really broadens our understanding of heredity.
Wow, the idea that our experiences could leave biological traces on future generations. That's powerful.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it challenges simpler vows of classical genetics. He even sees traits like intelligence, personality, and behavior as products of this ongoing dialogue between our genes and environment, a dialogue extending into our social and cultural lives.
I remember him bringing up a cultural example too.
Yes, he uses the example of K-culture in Korea, highlighting it as a kind of hyper-adaptive cultural genome characterized by connectivity, creativity, and resilience. But he also points out the paradoxical challenges facing Korean society, like ultra-low birth rates, social media addiction, chronic stress, suggesting these are entangled effects of biology, technology, and intense social pressures. It underscores the need for an integrative approach, connecting biology, sociology, psychology.
This idea that humans are no longer just passive recipients of natural selection seems central to his argument about Homo intelligence.
Precisely. The book argues that with the rise of technologies like synthetic biology, gene editing, cloning, digital twin technologies, we're moving into an era where we can actively manage and reconfigure human biological destiny. We are becoming, in his words, architects of our own evolution.
And information plays a critical role in this new paradigm.
It's fundamental. He argues that humans are increasingly becoming flows of information, using AI as a tool for self-design. He even introduces the concept of a digital genome for AI and explores the potential for information itself to mimic life in certain ways. This leads to rethinking intelligence and its development.
Suggesting intelligence isn't entirely inherited.
Right. He argues intelligence develops through constant interaction with the environment, heavily influenced by epigenetics. It's not just the genes you're born with, but how those genes are expressed and nurtured through experience.
Given this power to manipulate our biology, does he touch on the ethical implications?
Absolutely. He raises critical ethical considerations arising from our ability to manipulate genes and our coevolution with AI. This includes concerns about genetic discrimination, the redefinition of human identity in an information-driven society, and the immense responsibility that comes with the power to shape our biological future.
He also mentions the concept of the digital me. What's that about?
That's the idea that as our genetic information integrates with AI and digital twin technology, a new form of self emerges in the digital realm. It's a fascinating concept considering our biological information existing and being simulated in digital space.
It all seems to point toward a very different understanding of our place in the grand scheme of things. He even talks about the interconnectedness of time and genes.
Yes, he paints this beautiful picture of our genes, recording the history of past evolution, manifesting in our present traits, and being passed to future generations, essentially representing a living timeline connecting us all.
And he revisits some conditions often seen negatively, like ADHD, through a different lens. He does. He floats the idea that conditions like ADHD might not be simple genetic errors, but potentially evolutionary survival strategies that were advantageous in different environments. Traits we currently see as challenges might have been adaptations in the past.
A reminder that what we label a malfunction might just be a variation that was once beneficial. He also touches on the biological basis for social behaviors, like love and empathy.
That's right. The book explores the genetic underpinnings of our sociality, including the evolution of empathy, reinforcing that even our most complex social behaviors have roots in our biological makeup. And threading through all these topics is the recurring influence of epigenetics.
Because epigenetics is really that interface between our genes and our lives.
Exactly. He emphasizes how our lifestyle, environment, and experiences can alter gene expression through epigenetic mechanisms, affecting not only our own health and aging, but potentially the transmission of traits across generations.
So pulling it all together then, what's the overall vision for the future presented by Min-Seob in Genome Compass?
His vision centers on this concept of Homo intelligence. It's a new era where humans are no longer just shaped by evolution, but are essentially rewriting our destiny through the strategic use of intelligence and information. He sees the genome compass as a crucial tool for self-understanding and designing the future in an age of profound uncertainty.
It sounds like a message that's both empowering and carries a significant weight of responsibility.
Very much so. He concludes with the hope that the book serves as a starting point for much-needed contemplation about humanity's future direction amidst our rapidly changing landscape.
Okay, so to summarize our deep dive into Lee Min-Seob's Genome Compass, the key takeaway seems to be his call for a new understanding of humanity as Homo Intelligence. We're defined not just by our genes, but by the dynamic ongoing interplay between those genes, our environment, and the vast amounts of information we now interact with, especially in the context of advancing AI. The book encourages us to see our genome not as fixed destiny, but as a responsive compass guiding us into an uncertain future, and to embrace the idea that we are no longer passive recipients of evolution, but active participants capable of shaping our own biological trajectory.
It's a really powerful and thought-provoking perspective. Perhaps a final thought to leave you, the listener, with is this. Considering Lee Min-Seob's perspective, how might your understanding of your own potential and humanity's future shift by viewing genes not as fixed destiny, but as that responsive compass? And what are the profound implications of humans becoming, as he puts it, designers of heredity in an age increasingly filled with intelligent machines?
Definitely some deep questions to ponder. We encourage you to explore these themes and concepts further, maybe by seeking out Genome Compass itself or related research. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive today.